Hi, I'm Seamless, and it's Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. Ooh. And today we're going to start out with 7-8 Futury kind of thing by Epic Tanks Man. And that's a very specific title. That's very specifically what it's about, and it's already giving me vibes I want to hear about. So, with minimal ado, let's review. Okay. This was fantastic. Like that was a real hard thing to do, and you pulled off pretty good. It definitely came off very jazzy, didn't it? And I gotta wonder if because like that tends to be the genre, right? Like that and metal and other things tend to be the ones that have the weird type signatures, and I think it's mostly because the styles lend themselves to that, where a kind of sideways chaos. It's not even really chaos because it's not. It's got to count, but uh it still feels very like it resolves, but you don't really know when most of the time if you're not just spending your time counting. But this is a very well orchestrated bit of thing, right? The instruments doing the music, the melody and the progression is great, like full on amazing. Like, and I said orchestration, I mean like when all the stuff comes in and the order of it all, like all your choices on when stuff happened was beautiful. And I'm really stressing this point because like instrument choice left me questioning things. In particular, one moment. if I had you in person, I would ask you what your goal was. What your goal were, yeah, for doing this. And the goal in particular, like why I need to know, is because there's a question of realism, right? Like how real were you trying to be? Because even if you weren't trying to be real, use another piano library. I don't know if it was you that used it last time, but someone did before, and I had the same sort of reaction. It's something that really only producers feel, because why would any other listener have any concept of what like the basic newbie thing sounds like unless they are themselves producers? That's the sort of thing that we tend to lose a little track on sometimes, which is that because we imagine, like, we can hear a lot of these faults and things that we think that listeners can too. Like producers who are listening can, and if you want to make stuff for producers, that's fine. But that's how you get music for musicians. And like this, I mean, we're talking about 7/8 here. We're already way past that, obviously. But the point I'm trying to make is there's that, but there's also a whole genre of this stuff that sounds the way that does, out of what sounds like almost an intentional desire to sound kind of off kilter, to sound almost over synthetic, but like not like as those synths were the point, right? Not like a John Carpenter kind of thing where it's like, okay, here's what synths are like, let's make a synthy sounding synth thing. No, these are all synths doing the jobs of instruments. These are all things that like a regular jazz sort of ensemble-y big band thing might be doing. And it would actually sound super great. Like if this was done up like a Sinatra song, it would sound awesome. And if that was your plan, I can definitely see this happening. It's just that all of your samples need to change. All of them. Not just the piano at this point. Like if realism is the goal, you definitely have a lot of the right calls in terms of like when stuff happens and how like players and playing and that kind of thing. It all felt very realistic, which is why I'm assuming some of that was the goal. And even if it wasn't, if part of it was that you wanted, because you said a future-y thing, that it sort of assumes a certain amount of like synthetic introduction, that like even if it's not, even if it is a realistic thing, that like there is going to be a noticeable layer of some sort of newer deal, which is probably going to be synthetic, but probably not every single element, and probably not to the tune that makes it sound like it's from like a Yamaha MIDI keyboard, which a bit these drums do. Like this sort of section had that feel. Didn't feel very real. It felt right. It felt like I was reading sheet music on something that would be the song, like in a standard. That's how on point the music is on this track. Like it feels so just like a thing that would be what players played to practice playing at this tempo. It's a full-on etude, dude. Like, good job. So though, if your goal is to be sort of this hybrid, like part of the hybrid involves that some amount of it needs to actually need to sound kind of realistic. So here's one step. If you're using FL Studio and you're using FL keys, don't. I don't just mean go buy a piano library, although a lot of them are really good. There's better ones in FL. Use the direct wave ones, even if it's just using the player. You don't need direct wave. You don't actually have to own direct wave to use direct wave library. Shit. To use direct wave libraries, you can actually just play them. You just don't have a whole lot of control over them. But for things like pianos, you don't necessarily care, do you? And that's something that like would help a lot, and probably help also. I don't know. I was really, really, really into FL keys for a really long time. In fact, it was the almost the selling point for me. Like I was gonna get FL4. Like I had FL3 because that was the school's copy, so I didn't actually own FL. And then when it came time to go actually buy FL4 was already out. And when I finally got my hands on FL4, I was thinking to myself, oh my god, because like I wanted to go like let's do things trailer, and I had Slayer and FL keys. I'm not actually sure if FL keys was in FL3 or not. If I just hadn't found it yet because I wasn't very good at this thing. But point is that like those two very comparatively realistic sounding things was like my gateway into trying to synthetically recreate real things, and they're not wonderful. They're kind of okay, but they're not like the greatest things in the universe. But like I love them to death. I'm not saying they're bad, but they have a certain taste to them, and like even if other people can't tell, it's just always going to be my recommendation that you use something else. Even if you use it to like write stuff, just put another library, layer it within the library, layer it within the copy of itself. There's things you could do to it to make it not sound like that. Some of the settings inside FL keys do things. Yes. All right. Well, anyway, good job overall. Epic takes, man. Extremely good music, and just with some sample choices, I think you could make like, and it's saying something that like this is one of the reasons why people talk about like being good at writing the music part. Like if you're always asking like, if I know anything about writing music, it's going to be an impediment. If I don't, if it's going to be an impediment for writing, like to actually producing music, to producing a track. And it really depends on how musical you go with it, right? And something like this, though, you didn't have to go this musical, but you also just could. And now that you did, you have options. It's not just like options you can be complicated. I mean, like you can be different kinds of songs now. I spent a whole bunch of time explaining about how this would sound right at home, being a perfectly realistic, completely real song. But this could also be a perfectly synthetic synth song and everything in between. Certain other songs at certain complication levels and certain musical quality might not have that option. Like it might sound bad if it was given the realistic instrument treatment because it just wasn't written to like facilitate that level of like requirement. You know what I mean? So this is why this is the main benefit of being able to do that. Even if like the technical sound of the things you're using aren't all that great. And I'm really thinking about this track because that's its primary downfall. Sort of pretty much every individual sound has some kind of about it. It was mixed together pretty okay, but like just about as okay as that stuff can be. Cool. All right, coming up next we have Starblade with Cysmquake. Let's see if you can see how that's spelled. That's wow, that's interesting looking. This looks like it has a story, and I'm interested to hear it. Okay. Let us begin. All right. This is a lot of stuff. This is very thing to thing moment, like, wow. So I'm saying wow because right off the bat, one of the first things I thought of was, okay, this reminds me a little bit of Voltron, the currently running show on, I think it's called Currently Running, but it's a show on Netflix, and it's really rad for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that's super good about it is it has it's a super nice soundtrack, and it's got really kind of pleasant sort of synthy focused stuff. It's actually a pretty good. I mean, I mentioned John Carpenter. It's pretty Carpentry. It's very much it's Voltron. It's from the 80s. It's very that. It's very doing it, but it's doing it like special. It's really doing it. And what I find fun about this setup and also the sound selection is that this was sounding like it fit pretty well. This is slightly on the extreme side. This is like just slightly heavier than what would actually ever be in a show like that or in any show at all. Just mixing concerns, but like a song tailored as such. Like it's got all the right bits, but the bits are like as cool as the bits are. Like this section is a good example. The sounds are awesome. Like I especially had a lot of fun with this guy. Like I liked a lot of the things that occur in here, and they're definitely a lot more interesting than the kind of sound design in the sources I just mentioned. Like they do neat things and all, but they don't like the envelopes they push are slight. Let's put it that way. And that's not like a dig. It's elegant stuff. It's great. But the point I'm making about this stuff is that despite it still being that, like this actually still looks, it's still arranged as though it were that like brick by brick kind of like mechanical assembly of a track that those tracks tend to be when they integrate these things. Like when dubstep first started getting popular in 2009 as a thing that anyone knew about, then they started getting into like video games and things. And by 2013, you started getting pretty okay sort of normal tracks in there, but they didn't want to go too far. Like it's a very flashy genre. This is very flashy stuff, but the job is to try and introduce like it's like a Zimmer style, integrate some amount of that kind of music, that kind of sound design, but not really threaten the other stuff. And that makes it fit with all of whatever it needs to fit with. This track is just barely too much of that. I doubt it was for the purpose. I'm not being like, you have failed to be a Hans Zimmer fit XL Junkie track. No, I'm talking about Junkie XL. Is how that's said. But what I'm talking about is like, I feel like the choice, the inspiration was so focused on that you sort of ended up with a track that was arranged as though it were that anyway. This still ended up very much like a track I would see in like a game. Like it has the medley kind of approach going on, whereas it's sort of like having movements. Yes. Oh my God, if I ever have merch. But this, the sort of way that this is cut up is like, you can kind of identify them as parts of the track and like and label and whatnot, but like what they kind of look to me as is almost like what ends up being like in a track on like a video game OST, which is really just one track that has all of the various things that happen in the game just kind of played in sequence. Because those tracks aren't really tracks. Like they don't. A lot of them are actually designed to be dynamic to the point where they're not. There wasn't really a thing that was written that got then taken apart to be dynamic. It was just a bunch of bits that were created to feel the way it needed to feel when it was being played. And so then they just kind of layered them together in a repetition that felt right. And then you do that like one time, and then for the next stuff, and then for the next stuff, and then for the next stuff. And that's how you end up getting like these like one or two kinds of tracks out of games that are really a bunch of like togethery things of other things. And I gotta wonder if a little bit of that was an influence in creating and like finding this flow. It's still a flow though. It still goes, and I have no complaints about it. Like it's from place to place, and the places it took me were great. You know, I have no complaints whatsoever in that regard. I don't really have complaints about much. Like this mix is pretty spot on, guy. Look at this. Like all the stuff fits in nicely. Like with sidechain, I mean not so much deeper, like and more noticeably, I guess. Like you can still hear the hits and all, and everything kind of hits really even, which is another reason why I brought up like the cinematic kind of video gamey texture that targets that's different from like just the plain old listening or dancing texture. Those sorts of power distributions are designed to feel similar, but they're not actually similar because they're designed to fill as like a background to other stuff that has the things that has the power that something like this would have. But it doesn't have the power because it's all very even. And again, I gotta wonder if the influence You know what I mean? Like, the hits on the basses have the same amount of transient force that the snares and the bass and the kicks do, which is not necessarily a dig. I dig that texture. It's pretty fun. But it means that their peaks and their feeling is at the level of the kick and the snare, which makes it like this is just a dynamic range question of like it doesn't feel louder than the other elements. And part of that is I gotta wonder if your source kind of inspirations were slightly smooshed more so than not. Kind of recognize some of that. I'm asking these questions as though I didn't have lessons with you, but the idea here, like, of this arrangement, is primarily my biggest takeaway from this. I honestly like stuff like this should be more like this. It should, like, some of the coolest, like, prime era, like, not necessarily dubstep, but just to use the word bro step era, like, tracks that I liked the most were the ones that were just the really big collabs that had like 4 people on them, because the drops were just like, here's this section that's my cool ass bass and a neat fill and a neat little transition. Nate, here's my section with a cool ass bass and a neat fill and a fun transition. Here's my section with a fun little melody and a quick and change up and a kind of hollow hit. And this is my section. Like that's what the whole song was, and that like was awesome. It barely needed any kind of connective I'm using the music as sort of like the analog to a video game's plot quality. I don't know how accurate that is, but that feels pretty on point. And there's that sort of like fun versus plot, where like how much of a difficult plot do you need to really have to facilitate fun? The Doom is a big example of a kind of like deep but not deep scenario. So almost like Half-Life 2, where it's like this sort of like suggestion of depth, but not totally well explained, right? This is but it's mostly just there to make you like kind of feel like you can feel like it's there if you want to feel like it's there. That felt pretty meta, but that's because we're not really paying attention to it. We're focusing on the fun. We're driving a Doom buggy, like that kind of thing, and or blowing up demons and stuff like that. Like because that's the point, right? Like these were not really bugs. We're playing these games, and that you can do the bugs if you want. That's fun. That's neat. That's just a sign of good game design that you can if you want to. But the general assumption is that you're going to bullet storm it up and deliberately just kind of like put plot to the wayside and not even care about it until you establish everything else about the game. And that kind of feels like how sometimes I approach making any piece of music, is like I really want to build the engine before I try to like write the game, so I even know what I can do. And to me, that engine is like the rhythm section. You make your drop, you make your your drums and your bass and stuff and whatnot. And you create all that, and you get your mix and your master, and you sort of have like, that's like your physics engine now. That's the place within which the stuff can happen. Now, because I know that this is true, what's the stuff that can happen? What's the best stuff that can happen? What could be cool? That's how I approach it, for better or for worse. And I genuinely don't remember. Oh yeah, the fact that like a track, honestly, if its whole job is to show off neat sounds, can just be just thing after thing. It doesn't have to have that much like worshipped super sectional 11-minute song treatment. How long is this song? Can I even see? It's so far away. It looks like not very many minutes. But yeah. All right. Good job, Starblade. Up next, we have my folder with the songs in them. Here we are, Outerstate with ID.mp3. That clips. Yeah. That's the first thing I look for whenever anyone hands me an MP3. It was right up here. Is it gonna clip? Or how does it do that in the beginning? Like, I know how. It's not that complicated. It's not even that like uncommon, but it's still just funny. You know, it's an MP3. MP3 is I have to look into something about the visualizer. Besides, I also have visualizer plans, and that might give us further insight into that nonsense when it is ready. All right, here we go. fantastic. So at the end there, when I was kind of freaking out with the zoom, I'm looking at the XSplit window more than I look at like anything FL shows, because it's actually held nice and cozy and like a good space to look at, right? But I tried to like use that as through XSplit, and that's not how that works. Anyway, so I think we legit just saw the birth of a new genre right the hell here. You know, that's what Big Room is, but for synthwave. Like, I don't know that you want to call it big wave. But because I name things with numbers, don't take anything I name seriously. But I'm calling this the genre because, like, okay, I was talking about like purpose of synthetic sounds over realistic sounds, right? And this is interesting because this actually has the synths have the realistic treatment. There's lots of air in there, and that's pretty much what reverb is about. It's about making, that's like what reverb is trying to make a thing sound like it's in us, in our space. That's the quote unquote realism. So like a real dry sounding, real actual dry direct recording of something will sound fake if it's in a too perfect condition. And so like this dry sounding synthy synth stuff got put all wetted up into the reverb, and it fills out nicely. And on top of that, like Big Room as a genre, right? Bit of a difference, but like this has this like over here it turns into like full on actual kind of synthwave, or like with the snare and whatnot. But and I guess it does here too. But the Big Room texture is more like there's a big old build up with essentially the same stuff. It's more modern, like it's a lot less. It doesn't really pay attention to the 80s as inspiration. It pays attention more to the trance styles for inspiration in terms of its saw wave content, and the drops end up with these sort of sparse things that are kind of a synthetic thing, like a synth thing that a synth can do. And that's also what this is like. But and what's great is, but this is just like a Big Room. The thing that ends up in the drop here like distills the texture. It like later you get the big drop with the music going, and there's the chorus and that kind of thing, and that's cool. But like it's the whole dropped down bare minimum expression of what it means to be the genre is that happens. And this has like, as in a musical moment, in one musical moment, encapsulates basically the whole purpose of synthwave, and it's really something. Like, let's just listen to this again. Like it's not like the root monolith or anything. Like you can make claims to a thing being more 80s and whatnot, but as far as what all the things are descriptively, this is the most stripped down version of it, and it works so well. And I would love this if this became a genre, like so much more than how I actually thought Big Room was clever the first time I heard it. And then the copying, but like this actually has room to be something that could be clever multiple times, not just once. And like the rest of this is also gold. Like it has a really excellent balance between a very light and fluffy musical spaciness with this just monolithic super kick that's put on the way, and everything is taken care of around it, and I love it. I love that very much. I also love very much how your main filter guy here, like the chorus effect on the synth is timed in such a way that the filter motion makes it look like it does this sort of 3D thing. And I'm only bringing in context to that because of this moment right here. This is actually something pretty special. This actually has solved something for me in terms of what makes two very different sounds happen. Like in my mind, different. You're gonna hear them. You might not necessarily even notice, but like let's see if we can zero in on the thing that made it special for me. So here's one way, right? You can see this kind of like little tent being spared and like happening, plus this extra junk. I think that's just it interfering with some bits up here, but same thing up here. And like here's one looking. I guess they're all kind of like that, aren't they? The idea being that like its harmonic structure is like you see these lines are kind of on, and like this one starts to, and it's because you could tell that like it would have been the whole expression if it was led there, but it was cut short. But effectively what that means is now the expression is this. And with that in mind, this being the way that it is makes it sound the way that it does. Like the fact that it appears quote unquote sideways, even though it's the same setting as this. What really is that like we're hearing like what made this sound cool and what makes this was going to sound like. Let's just hear the difference, right? So you hear how this one had like a real on. Oh, I get it now. That's phase cancellation from unison. So this guy sounds solid because he's on phase anyway, and we get the high frequencies there. But it also sounds solid because the harmonic structure is basically like tipped off the whole way down. So like the ride on the filter down. So like we're looking at a ride down right now, like not just on this cut up stuff, but like on a filter action. There's a filter action happening here, and there's a filter action happening here too, up and down. So right now it goes up against it the same way that it would have. This kind of a hit, but like it would go up against it, and now it comes down. But instead of going down with the shape kind of aligned, it goes down before it, and now they go down is against the shape that's going in a different direction entirely. And that's what like this sort of like that sound versus that sound. Like it might not sound like much to you, but for me to be able to visually and like shape identify the character nature of that is huge, because it explains a lot of things about a lot of other stuff, and plus with a bunch of other stuff that I figured out about other things, it means more things. That made no sense to say out loud, but hopefully that translate into some cool how-to-base stuff, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, dope track was dope. Good job, Outerstate. Hope you name it something. It may very well be the name of a genre. Moving on. We have Neodyne as the Neodyne Project with City of Darkness. This is a moderator from the Discord, which, by the way, if you want your tracks featured on one of these videos, I had to physically stop myself from keeping my weirdo tune. You want to head on to the Discord channel and submit your stuff to the submissions channel that is offered in there. There's a bunch of rules described, all kinds of everything's on the way, and like one of these mods, and this guy in particular is one of the ones that sifts through to make sure that you have things like a link that works and a download that works and I can access it that works. That is what this person does. He does a very good job, along with all the other mods and admins that do, I guess, hold on. What's my levels of dudes? There's mods. Admins, is that what we call them? I genuinely don't know. That's because these guys have done such a good job that, like, I genuinely don't know. That's how good a job they did. So, anyway, head on over to Discord channel. It's a big place. It's a bunch of, like, producery help for people who like to do complicated producery things. Because, of course, you do. Otherwise, why do you know who I am? Anyway, let's hear our track. extremely rad. This is a very on point track for what this is. There's two things I have to say about it. One is I just love this sound. Was it that sound? Was it this sound? It was this sound. Like, well, this little breaky moment was pretty great, and like this little talkie thing happening, it was so light. It's just so light, and like that's exactly how light you want to be with that kind of thing and this kind of thing. So that what track am I thinking of? Not the previous one, but the one before, maybe. Talk about realism and whatnot. Like this is sort of the opposite version of it, where it's like it starts with the real. It's all very sample based and all very that. So that means that the things you add to it are in relationship to it. And it's a bit like being in a metal track, and the whole thing about comboing, it's always comboing this stuff with that, right? And this stuff has a texture and it has a presence in a way that synths just they don't by default, because they're not real. So you make them sound real by putting them in space to make them like that the actually previous track that sounded very in the kind of in a big area, a big room. So it's kind of like this. Like you make that kind of consideration to make a thing feel like it belongs with a thing. If you want to make a thing feel like it belongs, that's not gold and whatever. But the sort of result is that you got texture synths and things in ways that maybe they wouldn't need to be otherwise. Like so, this one like didn't have a whole lot of power on top of the bottom, but it was very centered in this area, and it did the thing that it was doing, and the all the other sort of like stuff was happening. Like this would have been completely at home in a Transformers movie, and it would have been rad. So though, like for the target of that's the first thing to say, is that this part was cool. The second thing to say is that the high frequency presence on this track is a thing that needs work, and it's weird. It's like it's a bit of holy crap. It's it's inversions. It's like a harmonic inversion with mixing. That's got to be a technique. That's got to be something I bet you I can code. No. Maybe for later. What I'm saying is that like your big tappy repeaty synth. You get some things in there. You get that kind of guy going on, and then like thing kind of on the note, and that's cool. But in the things that tend to do that, you might notice when you reference them that they're very high frequency and they have almost no power at all. And it's also, you might notice this is sort of like a triple problem that kind of harps with the power focus here and not up here. The power down here becomes a problem. You might listen to Hans Zimmer's work or Two Fingers, maybe also the hymn too, but Two Steps from Hell, I was trying to say. And they have bass. There's like sub in there, and it's big and loud, and not as nearly as loud as you think it'd be for like that kind of content. And you try to do that for this stuff yourself, and there's the same old power problems you run into for the EDM business, and it's just that it's a lot more delicate, so you run into them a lot faster. And that means that you can't really do all the real special stuff, because that's the other part of the presence thing, is that the orchestra stuff doesn't sound right squashed. So you have to either make it so that it will sound right when you squash it, or you have to layer them in such a way that they're not impacted by other stuff. So the other stuff, the synth in here is doing it the whole way through. That guy has presence kind of in the down here range, and you basically want to take that power and just put it up here, make it in the pluck, in like the hit, like hat style. There's like a ticky-tacky kind of presence in a lot of these things that, oh god, these tracks are such psychoacoustic tricks top to bottom. Like they're all about, like, because we're in sort of dance music, we make all this stuff about making the mono and the low end and trying to be real present and that kind of thing, so that when we play them on big systems that it won't phase cancel and it'll sound right. It's not really the job though for this sort of thing and on movie theaters, because they have surround sound, they have multiple subs. They're expecting phase cancellation. They're expecting that to be a part of it. And that's part of the bigness that comes in this tracks, is that they just go ham on stereo separation on low end. Or they just don't have low end, and they therefore are able to turn everything up so loud that it feels like it does. That's kind of the game you're playing, is like you're still ultimately doing the same kind of like hardcore high passing and stuff that you would normally do on like EDM junk, but it's just that thinking every aspect about it is lighter. how high you go, how hard the slope is, how loud the thing is ultimately. Like, all of these things are just less and not as extreme. And what you end up getting is a whole bunch of stuff that sounds like it doesn't have any power, aligning pretty well with all the things that do. And it adds up, and it feels like it adds up. It feels like everything that has power does, because it's all a big old power sandwich. When really it's just like the few select things that have power with all these ticky-tacky things on top that are keeping everything timed. Like, that's how I view doing that kind of work. Because then you might notice you have an easier time futzing with the low end when the mid-rangey junk doesn't actually have the low end presence, or like less of it anyway. That getting the kind of like, because I mean, still sometimes I have issues getting that kind of power out of it. I don't even want to do that. Like, it's so wide, But then I'm not listening to that kind of stuff in the kind of environments that they're made for. Yeah, I'm always thinking about that junk. Moving on. Up next, we have Valdamaer. Lay here for a while. Oh boy. I'm afraid, guy. Okay, well, here we go. Let's see what you like. Do. I guess I should have known. This would actually make a pretty sweet big room lead. And it actually kind of looks like it's mixed to be one. I wonder if you accidentally rented out only a portion of your song. This was the link. That's what I got. I don't know what to say on this review other than, okay, well, let's just look at the sound design. I like that there's bit crushing kind of in there, and that this texture is a kind of metallic thing, but not quite metallic. It's like marimba metallic. Just the bare beginning of metallic, but not enough to go full bell. So though, you mix that up in there with the digital sharpness of bit crushing, and it actually bells out in a kind of way that is real special. Like, this is a fun layer, and it has power in all the right places, and this is exactly how you want to mix this kind of thing. A good job there, I guess. I guess next time make a song? I assume you did or are gonna or something, but yeah. All right, thanks for that. Moving on, we have RMC with Jet Speed. Oh, that's loud looking. Let's see what we got.
We are in the building, the time has come. Everybody's eyes on the clock, get ready. Shining through the windows, the rays of the sun. Everybody's energy's up, we're ready. Hey, yeah, no matter where we choose to go, the breeze is blowing and the sun is shining. So keep it coming now, and you should know there's no giving up, because there's no rewinding. Gonna bust a move at the speed of sound, buddy. Yeah, we're gonna bring the sound up tonight. We're gonna bust a move at the speed of sound, buddy. Yeah, we're gonna bring the sound up tonight. See us flying so high, 'cause we're birds in the sky. Jet speed up in the air, you couldn't catch us if you prepared. We are in the building, the day has come. Everybody's going to move, get ready. There's no competition, the champs have won. And everybody's here, so let's go, we're ready. Hey, yeah, no matter where we choose to go, the breeze is blowing and the sun is shining. So keep it coming now, and you should know there's no giving up, because there's no rewinding. Gonna bust a move at the speed of sound, buddy. Yeah, we're gonna bring the sound up tonight. We're gonna bust a move at the speed of sound, buddy. Yeah, we're gonna bring the sound up tonight. See us flying so high, 'cause we're birds in the sky. Jet speed up in the air, you couldn't catch us
I love this absolutely earnest attempt at like pop music. This is great. And like structurally beautiful, musically sound. This has all the parts that it needs to have. Is just the mix has some stuff to say, and I don't know about some vocal lines. Like the words are fine, the hook's great. Like this is all the bits, right? But like this bit that I'm talking about. So if you want your vocals to sound like that's your tone that you want, that's fine. There's still mixing stuff you can do, because like the ultimate thing is that your mix in general is not it doesn't have a lot of high frequency presence. Like a lot of the stuff feels pretty MIDI. And if you look at the stuff, you can pretty tell why. Like almost nothing is cut like down here. In fact, like there's some sidechain stuff where there's still basses happening in there. And like it's sure you don't want to cut maybe all things all the time all the way, but you want to cut some things all the way. And that like will help some of that sort of, there's a bit of mud sort of presence, but also that like the way you help that is by just having more things up here, so that the mud now sounds like a balancing power instead of just a loud kind of presence. Because that's what I get out of your voice. Your voice is down here in there with the snare, and it makes it like, and there needs to be more up there. So let's get up there. How do we get up there? You can EQ yourself, and you can EQ it fine, and you can compress it, and you're like doing whatever auto-tuning nonsense, pitcher stuff. What's the new tone? There it is. Yeah, what's the new one called? All that stuff, you can do that. So that means that you can like push some of your harmonics pretty hard to line up and be good, and like you just make your presence balanced. Or you can move with the kind of power that you gave your performance here. That kind of like always on, like really giving it energy kind of thing. I'm not a vocalist, oh my god, but you know what I mean, is that like you want to still be doing that for these lines. If the talk vibe was the vibe you wanted, you got it, is I guess what I'm saying. But mix wise, high frequency, like you can pretty well see this, right? And this might feel cool, especially individually. Like all the individual elements probably felt great when it had all of that presence there. But here's the trick, is that when they're all playing, it's not that you wanted them all to have all the presence that they would all add up to. It's that you want them, when they're all playing, to have as much presence as they all individually had as a maximum. That means you got to bring them down a lot when they add up. That's sort of what sidechaining is for, and you can actually do that for other instruments too, and not just like kicks and things. So, like you can make this something an automatic process for when you do want things to have certain power when they're by themselves. But that kind of cutting and shaping and moving and adding is the thing you want to do to make them add up the way to make it sound like a 303 track or something, which this sounds like, and it's cool. I'm glad that people are still LMFAOing. Neatery. All right. Coming up next, we have Kruasan with 108 Buddha's Friends. This is either at 108 tempo or it's about 108 of Buddha's Friends. Either way, I'm interested. Here we go. Here we go. do you see how much better other piano libraries are? I am a big fan of this track because it reminds me a lot of how I used to write tracks, and in that, like, I would have all these instruments and they would sound kind of a way that would give me a sort of direction that'd be almost a kind of thing, and then I would just be trying to do that kind of, so like Eastern flavor, right? I say that because it was said that in the Discord, but I'm bringing it up because what I would do is essentially this. I would go and find instruments, play them, and layer them together, and then just add more, and add more, and add more. And I was doing, without even realizing it, essentially, I mean, it's progressive. It's progressive writing. It's essentially what a trance kind of style of writing is, but like it's generally just referred to as progressive. And this track is amazing because it does all of that. It's fine doing it, but it has a full-on break, like a break beat. Like, this is what a break beat is, you guys. This. There's like not enough stuff happening, but this is a break beat. Like, when people talk about the break beat genre and they sampled other songs as little breaks, they'd be sampling this song's this and turning that into a loop, and then that'd be the loop they made to use to make the rap on. Like, that's what that is. It's like, this is the first time I've seen a modern breakbeat actually used for real, I think, ever. Good job. I also love how this track is treated very, like, also how I would treat tracks back then, which is very Peter Wolfian, very, like, every instrument, they're doing something, they're saying, they got something to say, and they're gonna say it. There's gonna be a moment in the song where they'll be let loose, and everyone's gotta have a moment. And then eventually they'll come around to be the central point on a thing, and then like this outro though is something like it's really a focus on it, and like I'm not 100% on how long it is. Like, maybe do this section, but like twice, like cut up this bit and this bit and merge these two bits. Like, that's what I'm doing. That's what I would think to do for this part. Other than that, like the timing on most other things were great. Like, I would not have thought, like, in the stage of my writing time when I was writing this kind of thing, I wouldn't have put this bit in here, but that's not a better call. I'm just examining the mistakes that I would have made to make something like this. The mix was okay. I don't know what we were going for, honestly. I'm not really totally sure like how to grade necessarily the attempt, just because like when I was trying for this sort of thing, I don't know necessarily I knew what I was trying to do. Like, this sounds very like band, right? Like, this sounds like there's definitely a push for it to sound a lot more like realistic, and for a lot of ways. And some of those elements contribute to it. Like, this bass is a little too synthetic for me to take like seriously, and to the degree that I didn't even think to do so until just now, when I wondered if perhaps there was an attempt to be realistic. It's not like I haven't heard a player play like that. It's just that it all sounds very like on, like very on, a lot more on that. And I mentioned stuff going on. So break beats, right? Like, I don't know if you saw the Get Down, that show. There's the bit where they're recording the song that ends up being the killer break beat in the last battle, and they show the group play it, and they actually have the moment where they do the whole bit and they go to the break. And I'm bringing this up because it's not just a drummer that's in these songs. It's in a lot of these songs, it's just a drummer, obviously, but the best ones, the ones that kill hardest, are the ones that have a percussion section. They have more than one person doing more than one thing, and it'll be the drummer doing the bit on the kit. It'll be a bongo player. Like, that's a lot of reasons why. Like, you ever wonder why like bongo hits are a thing in drum and bass? Like, if you go and listen to lots of like KJ Saka style stuff, like drummers like him will have tom things that are basically designed to sound like that when hit with a drumstick. And the play is that the cut up samples were often cut up percussion sections, and they would have a layer of a player playing them, layers of players playing lots of stuff like triangles, tambourines, shakers, all of that junk would be in like the full ass ensemble, which is why like you'd also have songs like this, exactly like this. I don't even mean like they'd be as sparse, but they would sound fuller and real. I mean, like, this is what it sounds like. This is actually very realistic. But those, like, if I were to, I mean, I guess it's just about a personal choice that if I were going to emulate something, it would be the fuller That's not necessarily harder. Like, it's just to get those instruments. Like, you nailed all the rest of these guys. You nailed the sounds on most of this stuff. Like, this is wow. We had a lot of weird attempts at realism today. I don't say weird, mostly just like disparate. Like, I have to wonder how hard everyone was trying to sound realistic, and I wonder if that's even a good goal. Like, and there's the different methods of, like, you know, trying to be a synthetic thing and have a realistic component, or to try and be component and have an unrealistic component. That's the choice I usually break it down to, but honestly, that might be pretty restrictive too. Who the hell knows? Sometimes me. Okay. Overall, though, this was a good job. Kruasan with a K, because I have it written down with a J for some reason, because that's a typo. Not that reason. That's the reason. All right, then. If you guys have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to Don't forget to finish saying the sentence. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.